afternoon or good morning, everyone. Glad you could join me to talk about UR Energy and our two flagship properties. Both are in situ uranium mines in south central Wyoming. And so we've got a great story to tell. It's a very clean story, great projects that are in, one of which is in production. So we do like to start off with a photograph of our operating Lost Creek mine. There's the plant that we built 9 years ago. It's been up and running and producing ever since. We've not shut it down even in the low market times. We've been able to continue to produce. And the photograph on the right-hand side, it shows the first shipment that went out in the fall of 2013, shipping yellowcake to Converdyn for conversion. Make our attorneys happy here with the disclaimer statement. I might make some forward-looking comments as we go through. So I'll really focus on this slide for a good bulk of the presentation because it really highlights the two flagship properties that I've mentioned. First is Lost Creek, that's up and running and been running for 9 years. We've produced nearly 3 million pounds of U3O8, or yellowcake as it's commonly known, in that time. About 2018, we allowed the production rate to decline in honor and respect of the market conditions, which were pretty tough at that time post-Fukushima. Up until that point, we had been selling into long-term contracts and had some very profitable quarters, but we had to shut down or slow down the production for a while because we were running out of contracts and the market just wasn't there to support new contracts. But in the fall of last year, we were able to layer in two new, very high-priced contracts with major international players in the nuclear space. We're under NDAs with those companies, so we can't divulge who they are. But if I said their names, you would know them. They're very well recognized. But one contract is for 300,000 pounds a year over a period of 6 years. Second contract, same thing, 300,000 pounds per year over a period of 6 years. The contracting starts this year. We'll produce 200,000 pounds at Lost Creek to fill that first contract this year, and then it ramps up to 600,000 pounds total beginning in 2024. So right now, my guys are out there. They are drilling and constructing, preparing the mine site to ramp it back up toward closer to full production, and making good progress on that. We've been doing a lot of hiring. Last year, we had about 9 people at the mine site. Today, we've got right at 50. I need to hire about 5 more people to get back up into full production. So the resource at Lost Creek, 11.9 million pounds of measured and indicated resource, an additional 6.6 million pounds of inferred on top of that. Now, I will distinguish here between Lost Creek and Shirley Basin. Lost Creek, we have tremendous opportunity for resource growth. If you take a look at the SK 1300 reports that we've done, we have a map in there that shows all of the roll fronts, redox fronts that have been identified, but yet we've not chased them to the end. So we have a lot of potential for exploration growth there. Over the life of the company, we've had 6 exploration programs. Every one of them has been successful at identifying more pounds and bringing them into the resource categories. And our average discovery cost at Lost Creek is only 50 cents a pound. So we believe we've got a lot of opportunity there. And I'll show a map a little bit later that shows the 35,000 acres that we control that we can work on. We also have a reputation at Lost Creek of being a very low-cost producer. We can compete with just about anybody globally outside of Kazakhstan. We can compete with Cameco. We can compete with pretty much anybody else. Our C1 cash cost when we were in production in 2015 to 18 and maximizing those production levels was only a little over $16 a pound. For context, the spot market today is right at $50 a pound. Long-term contracts are 50 to 53. That's our C1 cash cost. I want to be very clear. The all-in mine site was around $33 a pound. And we believe we can get back close to those levels, plus a little bit of inflation, as we ramp production back up. Our second flagship property is Shirley Basin, also in Wyoming, and 8.8 million pounds of measured and indicated resources. Most of those are measured resources. We acquired the project from Areva back in 2013 as Areva, now Orano, was exiting the U.S. We liked the project not because it was that large, but because it's very good grade, it's extremely shallow, it is a proven in situ producer, probably the first in situ production mine in the world for uranium. And a lot of the infrastructure is there. The roads are already there, power lines are there, some of the buildings are there. So when we go in and we begin to mine there, it's going to be relatively easy to bring it into full production. Also, very importantly, the ore body is completely drilled out. We don't need to go in and do any exploration or delineation. Our geologists have already laid out the pattern design on the ore body itself. So that the downside is there's not much room for growth. The upside is that expenditure has already been made, and we're going to benefit from that going forward. Moving away from the two flagship properties to talk about the company and the contracting just a bit more. Just a few weeks ago, we did conclude a one-time contract with the Department of Energy. They set up a uranium reserve, and we were able to sell 100,000 pounds to the U.S. government at a price of $64.47 a pound. So we just got paid for that. We were glad to bring that money into the coffers. That program may be extended. There is discussion in DC about continuing that program. We'll see if that happens or not. If it does happen, we still have 224,000 pounds of inventory that we produced that we can sell into that reserve, or we can use that to backstop our contracts, whichever we decide to do. But again, we've got the two long-term contracts that we have signed up. We are very well cashed up right now. We just concluded an equity raise, and so we have $79 million in cash. And we also have that inventory of nearly 250,000 pounds that we can convert into cash if and when we decide to do that. For those of you that are not familiar with what in situ is, we're not a conventional miner. In situ is a Latin term. It means in the place. So we don't do any digging, blasting, tunneling. We don't have an open pit or tailings. What we do instead is we install water wells, and we inject things like groundwater, CO2, baking soda, and oxygen into the ore body. That dissolves the uranium, and we simply pump it up from an adjoining well. So we don't impact the surface hardly at all. You can see here that this is our operating mine unit 1. That was in June a couple of years ago. When we get done mining, we will restore the groundwater. We'll take out the wellheads, and within 5 to 10 years, you won't even know we were there. The sagebrush will start to grow back in, and that land will be released for free release. You could build homes on it, a school, whatever. It's free release. So moving away from the projects, I'll talk a bit about the investing thesis when it comes to nuclear power and the supply chain associated with that. But about 2018, the world really began to come to the realization that while renewables have their place and they're fantastic, they do have their limitations. And the world really started to look seriously at what are the good baseload sources of power that are carbon free. You've got hydropower and you've got nuclear. Those are really the two mainstay options when it comes to carbon-free baseload reliable power. With hydro, a lot of the rivers are already dammed, so there's not a lot of opportunity to grow hydro, but there is tremendous opportunity to grow nuclear. And so countries around the world really began to move toward nuclear power, began significant investment. The World Nuclear Association did a report, and this is a couple of years ago. They only do the report every 2 years. It'll come out again in September of this year. But they were projecting 4.2% annual growth in their base case, almost 8% annual growth in their upper case. That was before Russia invaded Ukraine. I was speaking with a gentleman with the WNA last week. He said those numbers are outdated. They're going to be significantly higher this year when the report comes out in September. So we're looking forward to seeing that report. But not just for electric generation, especially in the US, nuclear power entities are moving toward hydrogen production. Duke Energy is the leader in that, and they are moving toward that. The US government is subsidizing that so that they can build out that infrastructure. So there's a big move afoot to do that. And beyond that, small modular reactors are becoming more and increasingly popular in development and engineering. In fact, in my home state in Wyoming, Bill Gates' company, TerraPower, is actively licensing a small modular to replace a coal-fired power plant. And his objective is to replace numerous coal-fired power plants in Wyoming and Utah with small modular reactors. Now, I don't want to get too excited about the SMRs. I think they are going to become increasingly widespread globally. Rolls-Royce here in England is involved as well. But we're probably looking 5 to 7 years out before we see much demand for uranium from the small modulars. But it is coming. I think that's very likely. But as countries begin to move toward it, because of the carbon-free attributes, just countries around the world began to really jump onto the bandwagon. And I'm not going to go through the entire list here, but China really is the gorilla in the room. I mean, we hear that continually about various commodities. But China has said that they're going to build 150 reactors in the next 15 years. Keep in mind, globally right now, we have just a little over 400 reactors, and they're going to increase that by 150 in the next few years. Even in the U.S., we just turned a reactor on a few days ago, a Southern company down in Georgia, and they're going to be turning on another one here in a few more days or a few more weeks. That'll take our total back up to about 95 reactors in the U.S. In the U.S., we still have the largest reactor fleet in the world. That number was slated to decline over time, but because of the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed by a bipartisan Congress, there's tremendous support now for the nuclear industry in the U.S. And we're hearing from our utility customers that we meet with quarterly that they're not shutting those reactors down. I'm not hearing anybody saying they're shutting reactors down in the U.S. To the contrary, they're extending the life of them through licensing. They are lengthening the refuel times. They're doing everything they can to generate more electrons because they are being subsidized now by the U.S. government to produce that carbon-free electricity and hydrogen as well. So things are moving in the right direction in the U.S. And I've been in this industry now for about 28 years. I never thought I would see the level of bipartisan support that we see now in the U.S. across the aisle. Our two biggest champions are John Barrasso from Wyoming and Senator Manchin from back east. Those two hardly agree on anything. But when it comes to nuclear power, they're in agreement. And they are actually working on legislation jointly right now to cut off the supply of Russian material into the U.S. Unbelievably, low-enriched uranium does continue to flow from Russia into the U.S., and I'll talk a bit more about that in a few slides. So as the world moved toward nuclear power, the financial players really saw that and started to jump in and make investment in significant ways. Most importantly, the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust was established, and since that trust was established, they've acquired over 60 million pounds of U3O8 physical material to put into that trust. Importantly, that is a one-way trust. And the way it was organized and approved by Canada is they can buy pounds to put in the trust, but they cannot sell pounds out of it. It's one way. So as they buy pounds out, those pounds theoretically cannot go back in unless they reorganize their papers, their bylaws. Geopolitical risk. We can't talk about uranium without talking about what's going on geopolitically. Russia is a major player. They do a lot of the refinement in the space, and the Western world does not have the capacity to replace that. But that's where we come back into the story with Lost Creek. We are ready to ramp up. We're in the process of ramping up. 90% recoveries historically. That helps us keep our costs low. By comparison, most other mines that are in situ only get 60 to 80% recovery, and that really lends itself to our low cost. When we talk about ESG, the production from Lost Creek and Shirley Basin will offset more than 300 million metric tons of CO2 compared to coal-fired. So we're really proud of that. And toward closing here, just R&D, we are a leader in research and development. We've had a number of successes in that arena, the top 4 bullets. And we've announced 2 additional R&D programs centered around well casing, drilling technology, and also around water treatment. And we're making good strides on those, and we hope to have more to report on that in the coming months. So just closing up here, our market positions right here. The outstanding shares listed at the top there. We've also done the equity raise that increases that amount by 39 million shares, but we are extremely well cashed up right now. We've got great analyst coverage in the US and in Canada. So our takeaways are well financed, ramping up production, great contracts in place. So with that, I don't know if we have time for questions or not, but I'll pause there.